So my presentation today is just looking at the guidelines we have here at the British Library for our designers. So we have a set of guidelines that we issue to our 3D and 2D designers when they come on board to work with us for a project. Next slide, please. So we made the decision to produce some guidelines for accessibility, working with an access advisor, following visitor feedback on our text size, legibility, the density of text, especially in light of the fact that our objects are so text heavy. And often quite small, intricate details. So it's really important that our exhibition design works in making our content more accessible, pulling out key information and highlights. So like all libraries, museums and galleries, we're aiming for the highest possible standards of accessibility in the design of our exhibitions and permanent galleries. We want visitors to enjoy our spaces, we want to meet their access requirements, and we want to ensure our exhibitions are available to all. We make the assumption that when working with our design agencies that they're working to current regulations in the UK and working alongside the Equality Act of 2010. Next slide, please. So one of the key issues we often have is around typeface and size and legibility. So we're strict with our designers that the typeface that is used should be clear and accessible. We much prefer a simple sans serif and the use of mixed case. We like there to be a very clear distinction between letters and numbers. And aside from the exhibition title, we do ask that the titles of section panels, labels and quotes appear in upper and lowercase, as all capitals for big chunks of text are less accessible and are not very legible for visitors that might have visual impairments. We always ask that text is justified to the left, and we ask that line and paragraph spacing is generous, and we have restrictions on the length of paragraphs, so we try and keep to no more than 12 lines. Our curators absolutely hate us. Next slide, please. Backgrounds are very important to enable the text to be legible. Colour or tonal contrast is crucial for legibility, and printing on mid-tone should be avoided. Dark text on a pale background is the most legible, and you need to be really careful in the combination of colours. We tend to avoid yellow text and especially white on a yellow background, as it's not at all accessible. Avoid text being printed over an image or a patterned background, and we always avoid running text around images, avoiding shadows and outline effects, and always consider the texture that we're printing onto. Next slide, please. So a huge change that we made in recent years was to the number of words in our exhibition labels and panels and the size of our text. So we increased the point size to at least 20 points, and we now ask that our labels are no longer than 60 to 70 words. This has helped many things. It's made our labels and text more legible, much clearer and easier to read, particularly when there is a popular exhibition on where visitors want to look at every object and read every label. It helps with the pacing, it prevents bottlenecks, and just makes for a more a nicer experience. Visitors are generally, for our major exhibitions, they're paying good money for an exhibition ticket, so we want to make sure they have a good experience. It's also important that we have a clear text hierarchy, so this is something we established with the curators early on in the process to decide what interpretation we want in the exhibition. So ensuring we have an introductory panel, thinking about section panels, subsection panels, labels, and then AV labels. So we established that text hierarchy as soon as possible. Next slide, please. So the design is really important. So aside from the 2D design, we have to think about that 3D design, think about that experience. We want it to be captivating. We want to create atmosphere. We want it to be beautiful and exciting. But we have to factor in health and safety. We have to ensure that there is a clear route. We have to ensure that we allow turning circles for wheelchairs, access for prams, buggies, and also thinking about schools groups. You know, we like to ensure that we have some open space within our exhibitions, make sure that there's plenty of seating, and that the seating has leverage points to assist people with sitting down and getting up, providing guardrails where exhibits or AV project or stick out, so that those items can be detected by the sweep of a cane. And because of our objects needing to be lit at 50 lux, we do have to think about the exhibition lighting and thinking about, you know, highlighting stairs, fire exits, so that our visitors can navigate the space and we can just avoid the risk of anybody getting hurt if there was an emergency and evacuation. Next slide, please. So along with the exhibition design, we very much think about how the graphics fits into that. We have to think about sight lines, comfortable reading heights for the text panels, labels. If we're making showcases for an exhibition, then we really think about the heights of those cases, think about having our labels on an angle, and also allowing wheelchairs to sort of get up close, maybe get underneath sort of like the edge of the showcase so they can interact with the object and read the labels. Next slide, please. So the object display goes hand in hand with this. And again, we have to consider the heights of the objects on display. Avoid crowding exhibits together. It can be really tempting to get as many objects into a show, but it's not very comfortable for visitors, particularly those objects that are very dense with text and imagery. We like to, where we can, introduce tactile elements. And I think on some of my slides, you would have seen that we quite like a tomb in our exhibition. And there's one there. And it's quite nice to have something that visitors can touch, because so often they're told, do not touch, do not sit here. So it's nice when we can bring in tactile displays for children and those that are visually impaired. We, you know, as we said, when designing showcases, we really do have to think about an average height so that we can think about children and also think about those that are seated in a wheelchair. Next slide, please. And then digital design, again, we have to really think about the heights of screens. We ensure that all of our films are subtitled. We again think about if we've got an activity surface or a computer station, you know, we have to think about the height of that from floor level to enable wheelchair users to get close to the screen. We try to, for our listening points, have headphones at differing heights to allow for standing adults and those that want to be seated or in a wheelchair. We try to ensure that our on-screen instructions or, you know, supporting interpretation is clear and concise so that people can engage with the interactives easily. And audio only content should have an accompanying large print guide, and this is the same for our labels. We always ensure that we have a large print guide that visitors can then carry around with them. We have recently introduced hearing loops for all of our AV in our exhibition gallery, and again we need to think about noise spillage and trying not to overlap sounds from different zones and different AV points, especially where we're using ambient sound. Next slide, please. Oh, that's it. That was a really quick run through, and I think I'm just within the 10 minutes bit.